Welcome to Hiden Tastings, where the secrets of the dojo and the kitchen meet. This podcast is about hidden techniques that are not taught openly. They're reserved for those who've demonstrated deep commitment and understanding to life's arts. These teachings often include subtle principles, strategic nuances, or even spiritual philosophies that aren't visible to just anyone. These techniques, principles, and traditions are sometimes contained in written scrolls and books such as the Moku Roku, that form parts of a formal transmission of kinship or family knowledge. We explore the hidden transmissions behind both culinary and martial mastery. Join the hosts, Coach Bernie Toms and Sensei Dom T. Gallo, as they explore the connection between martial and culinary principles.
Half of my family comes from Sicily, so I'm going to use that as an example. In Sicily, they are very fond in their garlic and oil of adding anchovy, also known as alici or acciughe or acciuga in Italian. If you add anchovy, again, you're adding now not only somewhat of a fish flavor to it, but what we would call in Japanese an umami, a savory component that really kicks up the flavor now. But understand, now that you've added anchovy, you could add some red pepper flakes to give it some kick. You cannot, after creating this dish, add like grated cheese on top of it. That is like sacrilegious and heresy in Italian cuisine. You never
I see
add,
that all the time in the United States.
yeah, you never, and people do it all the time. They're like, I know Italians don't do this, but I like cheese on my fish. No, all right, cheese does not belong on fish, which brings up another really interesting thing about Sicilian cuisine. Sicilians, after making their garlic and oil with some anchovy, and I'll talk more about some other ingredients you can add, but after doing that, they like to toast up some breadcrumbs, either with some dried herbs or even fresh herbs. And this is called in Italian pangrattato. So pangrattato in Italian is toasted or fried breadcrumbs. Now, not only does it add another flavor component, this tiny little crunch from the toasted breadcrumb, and it's really wonderful on garlic and oil with anchovy, but also understand this brings up another point. This is all derived from what the Italians call cucina povera. Cucina povera is the kitchen or cuisine of the poor. So you have to understand, many years ago, especially Southern Italians, they didn't really have a lot of money, and only the nobility could afford something like fresh fruit and cheese. So they actually didn't have cheese to be able to put on anything. Actually taking breadcrumb and toasting it in a pan essentially became their cheese because they couldn't afford cheese.
That's
Right?
really, yeah.
It's ingenious. Necessity is the mother of all invention, right? Yeah, they ended up creating, which now today everybody uses pangrattato for so many things. Sometimes when I'm making grattato, besides adding like dried or fresh herbs to it, I'll add lemon zest. You can add a number of different things to pangrattato to really kick up those toasted breadcrumbs. And again, there's so many other ingredients that could be added to this. Anything but cheese. Again, adding cheese to any fish dish to Italians is like someone, ordering a cappuccino beyond the morning, like in the afternoon or evening. Again, that's sacrilegious. You just don't do that. Going back to what I was saying about adding like lemon zest to pangrattato brings up another flavor component in the pantheon of Italian cuisine called gremolata. So this is something that's done with a common dish from Milano in the northern part of Italy called buco. So osso buco are veal shanks that have been braised in wine and other aromatics and stock until it becomes extremely soft, tender, and it has marrow in the bone, and you want some of that marrow along with the meat itself. It's so tender, and depending upon how the sauce was crafted, it can have various different flavor to it. It is traditionally served with risotto alla Milanese, which is, a very saffron-based risotto dish equally from Milan. And what they will add, and this is true of some other Italian dishes, what they will add to finish off the dish is this gremolata, which is usually a mixture of chopped parsley, lemon or orange zest, and some diced or minced garlic. And again, you're adding this further flavor component on top. As a matter of fact, you could go ahead and add your toasted breadcrumb pan grattato on top of that as well. It might make some Milanese people from Milan a little pissed off, but you could certainly do it. That being said, going back to just garlic and oil, the other things people will absolutely add to that base dish are olives, capers, walnuts, or what we call pignoli, toasted pine nuts. You could add cherry tomatoes, and you can even add dried fruit like raisins or sultanas or currants. Now, I want to clarify the only difference between raisins, sultanas, and currants are the type of grape and where those grapes come from that are used. So raisins here produce pretty much anywhere in the world, absolutely here in the United States, are made from a number of different grapes. They could either be golden or red, but sultanas are grapes that traditionally come from Turkey and are usually golden in color. And then you have currants that are specific to the currant or the currant grape of, and that's the difference between those dried fruits. So if you think about it, they're actually interchangeable. As a matter of fact, you could even take things like dried cherries and dried cranberries and substitute it. Wouldn't matter. The dish will still come out amazing. But those
I've
are
never
all,
ever I've never seen or tasted that complexity is just mind-blowing.
yeah, no, you can. So that's going to take me to this next Italian dish. So again, going back to my Sicilian heritage, specifically to the capital of Palermo. So this is referred to among Sicilians and other Italians as Palamadana cuisine. It's cuisine that comes specifically out of the capital of Sicily, which is Palermo. And this dish is known as pasta con sadia. Pasta con sadia is basically pasta, usually bucatini or percatelli, which is a thicker pasta than spaghetti that has a hole in it. And it's a dish that starts out with the sauce being a combination of sauteed garlic and onions. You're then going to throw in some diced fennel, and you're going to save the fennel fronds, those tiny little hair-like things that are on the fennel. You're then going to add some raisins, or you could substitute some sultanas or currants. You have to watch, though, when you toast pine nuts, you have to do it over low heat, and you have to move those pine nuts around, or you can burn them, and then you got to start all over. But you're going to add some toasted pine nuts, and then you're going to add sardines. And some people will add saffron, give it a little kick. Some people even put in white wine. And you're going to reduce this. The sardines are going to add some of their flesh to the sauce to thicken it up a bit. You can add some of that cooking water from your pasta. I also want to make clear, the sauce can wait for the pasta, but the pasta cannot wait for the sauce. The sauce can
Yeah.
wait for the pasta, but the pasta cannot wait for the sauce, meaning you must always have your sauce prepared, ready to go. So when that pasta reaches that al dente, you're throwing it in the pan and finishing your dish. If you let that pasta sit around, I'm sure you've experienced this before where it just becomes a clump mess. Also understand it's because of the heat, the residual heat, it's still cooking. So now you're going to have the wrong texture and temperature to that pasta. Italians know from birth that when you cook pasta, the sauce has to be all ready to go, and the sauce can wait for the pasta, but the pasta cannot wait for the sauce. So again, once you take that pasta, you throw it into this pasta con sadia sauce, you're just going to toss it around with your tongs or a spoon. And again, once you plate it, you're going to add some of these preserved or reserved fennel fronds on top. Not only does it look pretty, but it adds another flavor factor of the fennel to this dish. And again, you can add your toasted pan grattato, your toasted breadcrumbs sprinkled on top of it as well. Again, never cheese because you've got fish in terms of the sardines. Another dish that hails from Naples, you've probably heard it before. You've probably seen it on every pizzeria or Italian restaurant menu here in this country. It's pasta puttanesca. So puttanesca is derived from the Italian word puttana, which means a prostitute or a whore. So it's basically pasta and prostitute sauce. And the reason why it's called that is, believe it or not, it either came out of an actual brothel or it came out of some prostitute who actually worked out of her home, who used to entice men to come to her house with this dish that she created. Or it was like the aftermath, after they were done with their business, she would serve this to them. And again, it starts out with the same base. It starts out with sauteing garlic and onions in oil. You're going to add some anchovy, some capers, some olives, and I like to use black oil cured olives because they have this intense flavor. You don't want to add too much because you'd add too much salt and overpowering olive flavor, but just the right amount of chopped olives, red pepper flakes to give it a little kick, and then you're going to add some crushed or chopped tomatoes. And you're going to reduce that all down, all those flavors macerating there. And then again, once the pasta's done, you're going to throw that into the pan, toss it around, get it all heated up and well mixed. Again, if you want, you can add some residual cooking water, get some of that starch in if you wanted to thicken up a bit, but it's fine without that. And then when you plate it, you're going to add some chopped parsley or even a chiffonade of basil. What's a chiffonade? That's taking any herb leaf like basil, rolling it up like a cigar, and then slicing it across until you have these fine shreds. And you can just sprinkle that on top. As you could see, it all came from that same base and all of these flavors. Now that takes me to yet another seafood-based dish, which is a time-honored dish cooked all over Italia, and that is linguine alla vongole. Now, that is linguine with clam sauce, and it can be bianco, which means white, or it can be rosso, which is red. Now, that sauce, again, begins with the same base of sauteing that garlic and oil, adding some red pepper flakes if you want some kick. You're going to add some white wine, and you're going to add either clam juice or some sort of fish stock, and you're going to obviously add clams. Now, some people just use like canned clams, which you can buy in a supermarket. Obviously, if you use fresh clams in their shell, the flavor is going to be much more superior. You'll even get some of the residual juice that's inside the clams when they open up. All of that juice will flavor the sauce that you're making. And that's just to make Bianco the white sauce. Okay. But you finish it in the same way. Once the sauce is done, you've cooked your pasta al dente, you're going to throw that linguine, and that is the traditional pasta type that you want to use for this dish. It's almost like spaghetti, but broader and flatter. It does better with this type of sauce than spaghetti would, but you can certainly use spaghetti. And I want to talk about now this stock or clam juice that you would use, because believe it or not, being half Japanese, years ago, I had produced a version of this using Japanese dashi. Now, dashi in Japanese is our standard fish stock or sea stock, and it can be made from either just kombu, which is Japanese for kelp, or it could be made from just what we call katsuo bushi. And katsuo bushi is smoked and fermented either bonito or skipjack tuna, and it becomes very flaky. So dashi can be made by either of those, or depending upon the dish, or it can be made by using both. So I had taken some instant dashi. That's right. Just like anything else, you can buy instant dashi, and many Japanese just use that instead of making their own. But I just used some instant dashi in producing a white clam sauce for my deceased father-in-law, may he rest in peace. And he loved it. He's, Dom, I got to tell you, this sauce just tasted better than any other white clam sauce I've ever tasted. What did you put in here? And I told him I had used Japanese dashi. So it gave yet another unique flavor factor to the resulting dish. When you make something like this, if you want to add your toasted breadcrumbs, your pan grattato, you can certainly add that on the top. If you wanted to make also the red version, all you need to do is add tomatoes to the basic dish and cook that down and reduce it before you mix it with the pasta. Again, there's a number of things you could add except cheese. You would not put cheese on this dish because of the clams.
The taste may linger, but the teaching is just beginning. This episode of Hiden Tastings is unfolding in a 3-part series, and what you've just heard is the second layer. If today's episode stirred something in you, be it spice, spirit, or story, pass it along to someone who'd savor it too. Be sure to return for the next course where we'll deepen the flavor and reveal more of the hidden thread. Until then, keep your knives sharp, your senses open, and remember, it's not just what we consume, but how we connect.